Hello, my friends, and welcome to another segment of Fireside Chats. Hopefully, you are doing okay on this fine Wednesday. Hope you are doing well. Hope your family is good. And Merry Christmas. This week for Fireside, I have a very special guest here to talk about his background, his work, and to give you all a fireside performance. So, without further ado, I present to you the Fireside interview. All right, y'all. Of course, welcome to another segment of Fireside Chats. I'm super excited to have my boy, my Neo, my mentee, national poet, finna go international with it,
Sir.
Mr. Nathan Wallace.
What's up? What's up? What's up? What's up?
What's up, man? How you feeling today? You feeling alright?
I feel like this light got me sweating like a sinner at an altar.
Now I feel that it's
Yeah,
shining bright on you, man. Just
that's
like your
good.
poetry,
That's
it's
good.
it's shining a light on everybody. And I'm super excited to have you. Thank you for being like my first interview with Fireside Chats.
I appreciate
It's
it.
a blessing, and I definitely appreciate you for taking the time out of your busy day to meet with me. First, just based off of like your poetry and things, like your poetry, it blends a lot of like personal experience with like broader cultural themes.
Hmm.
For you in your like creative process, how do you decide like what's yours to write or like versus what's larger than you to like kind of interpret?
So that question, I guess from the outside looking in, it might seem like that's actually a decision that's being made. Almost all the poems I write are for me.
Right.
Whether it's to rationalize my own experience or to rationalize how I feel about the world or how I even feel about myself or a certain circumstance, that's just the way I think. So all of the poems start for me. The bigger question is how do I decide what goes on the stage versus the page is the actual choice. And so then it really just depends on the devices I use and what I'm talking about. So it's like if I'm using a lot of like imagery, if I'm using some devices like let's say onomatopoeias, like those kind of show up better on the page rather than me saying boom or bow in public sometimes, unless
Right.
I'm using the bow as if it is a double entendre, like in one of my poems in my album. I have a line talking about Cupid, how I'm gonna bow before an arrow if he hear bow before the arrow. That's a triple entendre. So that construction fluctuates beautifully sonically. But if I was doing, I seen W.J. Lofton. He had a line in one of his poems. He was talking about like we need space, and so he talks about space, but then he said we need, and then there's an indention on the page. If I'm using a
Mm.
skill like that, I would rather have it on the page so you can see it in its full like its full glory. I would say. So
Okay.
sometimes if I feel like I don't, it's not really about y'all to relate to it and the devices are much more like page specific, is going on the page. If I feel like, oh, people are gonna need to hear this, people need to have this like people need to see this poem, then that's a poem I'm like, all right, I'm gonna have to do it on the stage or
Okay.
something.
Okay. So basically, you saying it's just fuck us then, and you just gonna write anything that you want about
You know,
you.
I feel like it's part of like ministering.
Yeah.
Like if I'm a minister to folks, then I gotta the poems that's going to actually minister to people are the ones that's going to actually come out
Okay.
on the
Okay.
stage. That's the ones y'all are going to hear. But
Right.
the poems that are like largely for me and for like very specific things that I might go through or very specific experiences. And a lot of my book work also talks about stuff for the public as well. But whenever I mean like I wrote it with me in mind and I wasn't thinking about your ear sometimes, I would say that's more of like a page thing. Like if I'm in my journal, I'm not initially thinking about how the audience is going to receive this. Now, once I'm actually dealing with a manuscript, now I'm detailing it for the audience's eyes, not necessarily their ears.
Right.
And so, if I have to think about their ears and what I'm wearing in my eyes, and if it's a necessary message to bring, then it's going on the stage. Like if I feel like God want me to tell this message, it's going on the stage. But otherwise, if I feel like He don't, then it don't. Because sometimes I've done my personal poems at competitions, they didn't want to hear that shit.
I feel
Like,
you. I feel you. I
and
feel
that's
you.
just what it is. Like, so yeah. So yeah.
All right, so let's talk about your poems a little bit. So, if your
Mhm.
poems had a warning label on it, what would be that disclaimer? What would be that warning label that you would tell people? Or what's on the
Ooh.
sign, rather? What's on the sign that you're telling people that this is what my poems are?
I would say if you're afraid of vulnerability and honesty, then I'm not the artist for you. So I was like, my warning label is it's gonna be vulnerable. It's gonna be honest. That's as simple as I can do it because I'm going to talk about blackness. I'm also going to talk about sexuality. I'm going to talk about sexual assault. I'm going to talk about my relationship with God or other people and all of these things and these faculties. And sometimes you might disagree. I have a poem where I'm talking about how gay people in church aren't treated right and how that's hypocritical for a church to treat somebody like that as a whole. Some people not going to be okay with it. But I said what I said. And so that's the kind of messages where I feel like if God told me to say it, I'm gonna say it. I would say it's unapologetically vulnerable and honest. Is the best warning label I can.
On the flip side, what's the worst place that you've ever been like inspired to write a spoken word piece or a poem?
I guess when I first started realizing that poetry could be something that could like take certain like emotions that were too strong in here out of my body and allow me to be able to function was whenever I had like my first heartbreak. I was trying not to cry in class in high school. I remember I was in my technology class, criminal justice class actually, and it was like almost all women in this class, and I was just like, "Ooh, I'm gonna have to see this girl in one more class. I can't stand this ever." I was in there, like I was like, "Ooh," but I miss her. Like I was in there real emotional on the paper because I
Yeah.
couldn't function, and I think that's one of like the first places that like it kind of like the wheels started turning. But I would say in terms of like the heaviest stuff, it'd probably be when my homie killed himself. That was like the worst like place. Like it felt like the worst place because
Right.
it was a situation where people don't know. It took me a while for people to actually get those poems. Smoke probably came out, debuted in 2022, maybe the end of 2022. Smoke wasn't even written until like my homie died in the kind of like May of 2021. That year and probably it took about a year for me to even emotionally process that, go through therapy. It was so many poems about that incident that y'all never heard because those poems wasn't for y'all. Those poems was for me to process. And so it's just like some of them are in my book while I'm processing it, when I'm talking about processing it. But just the heaviness of it and the amount of like emotions that it drew out of me on a consistent basis, that one incident made other poems hit differently. Cause it's like I look at Smoke when I'm talking about my homie suicide differently because now I get more emotional whenever I do poems like Packages when we talk about our frat brother Casey who died, because now I can really see the beauty in burying somebody who lived and died peacefully, because everybody doesn't get that. So now that poem makes me more emotional about that poem, and so on. Like they do it vice versa, and so it's like I would say that's like the worst space I would say that I've had to pull from for a poem.
So what role do you see like, poetry, spoken word, like what role do you see that playing in youth empowerment and collective like healing, especially us being black men
Yeah,
don't really process our emotions like that. So, being with organizations like Youth Speaks and like Brave New Voices, what role do you see that play?
honestly, that's probably the easiest question you asked me because we I think it's crazy that people find it hard to talk about how they feel when they're constantly doing things based off of how you feel. You're just because you're not saying the words doesn't mean you're still not expressing it through your actions. So it's like whenever I look at poetry, I look at it's communication. It's essentially communication. Before I was a known as a poet, I was a competitive public speaker. And so that's kind of that route. But whenever I've done workshops with the youth, whether I had them write poems, songwritings, raps, it's all the same. It's just storytelling. And before there was paper or manuscript, the way we told history, the way I told you something happened was I orally told you a story. There was griots. That's how history was passed through those songs and through that way. And so I think It's absolutely necessary because a generation that does not know how to vocalize the pain that they're feeling and doesn't know how to vocalize the things that they're fighting against is a generation that is losing a battle to the things that they're fighting. And so until you can call out the things oppressing you, we can't relieve the oppressors. And so I think it's incredibly important and it's incredibly healing because I'm giving people I get tons of opportunities to not only inspire people to write, but to give people the skills to just talk about how they feel. And even when you see a lot of my workshops, I do poetry workshops even with adults, and we unravel your childhood trauma based off of little things where I'd be like, oh, what's something in your childhood? What's a moment in your childhood where you felt unsafe? Or when you got angry? Why did you get angry? Why did you feel unsafe? Who made you feel unsafe? And then we go to our adulthood and we be like, oh, what's something that'll make you mad now? And it always links. It always links. And so if when you don't to go sit with yourself to really unravel that with your own thoughts, then you have to go to therapy and all these other things to do it. Don't get me wrong, I go to therapy. It's great practice. I'll be using it to write books, so I ain't gonna lie to you. It's a 2 for 1 for me. But I think it's incredibly necessary. You can't empower the youth without telling the truth. And as I believe John was it Baldwin said his own artist to tell the truth. Something of that matter. But it's always on artists to tell the truth. If we don't tell the truth, nobody will.
One more question for you,
Okay.
and then we'll get to the closing. But
Of
what is
course.
the most unhinged line that you've ever written that did not make the final cut?
So I'm gonna give you. So there's some unhinged lines that made final cuts. That's the crazy
Okay.
part. Like if y'all ever want to know, go listen to Blasphemy. Um,
Blasphemy. Okay, okay. Y'all
go
hear that,
listen to
people? Y'all
Blasphemy from
listen
my
to
album.
Blasphemy.
That's
All
a good
right.
one. I'm gonna give you one that I know made the final cut that my homies hate.
Yeah.
I tried to make Wigga a thing. My homies
I'm
hated that.
so dead.
So after Breonna Taylor died, I had a line where I was like, I want to lynch the spirits of the white folks who kidnapped my great grandmother. I want those Wiggers dead. My friends were like,
Yeah.
you didn't say Wiggers?
Yeah. Wiggins is.
Bro, get that out the poem.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the one poem that people hated, but they
Yeah.
didn't tell me they hated it because the poem was working for a
Yeah.
while.
It was. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
eventually they was just like, bro, I hate that line, bro. I
Yeah.
really do. So
Yeah.
Wiggers was it for
Okay.
sure. Wiggers was it.
Well, yeah, appreciate you for taking the time out. Let go
No
ahead and
problem.
let the YouTube know like how they can, follow you, get to
Say
learn
less.
more.
Yeah, you can find me anywhere that's important at Mr. Nathan Wallace. Mr. Nathan Wallace is just Mr. Nathan Wallace. My email is I am Nathan Wallace as well, but you'll find that on my Instagram page as well. My album is called Black Boy Blues. So if you look up Nathan Wallace and you look up Black Boy Blues, you'll see that on all streaming platforms, and you'll be able to listen to it, vibe out with it. And then I also have books. So if you ever need a book, just hit me on whatever, and I can get that to you.
Without further ado, y'all, this is Mr. Nathan Wallace, and he has a special treat for us today. We got the world premiere of a new spoken word piece. It's called The Christ in Christmas. And yeah, we're going to release that right now so y'all can watch it right after this. So, any final words that you got for the people, man?
Hey man, just keep rocking out with me. Love on who you can, while you can, and as the sayings in white households say, live, laugh, love.
All right, man. Good closer. Well, with
All right,
that,
bro.
y'all, here's the world premiere of The Christ in Christmas. And we'll catch y'all next week at the Fireside Chat. Peace.
It's easy to see the Christ in the Christmas plays when Holy Night is playing, or Mary, did you know, when there's a baby in the manger, but newborns have always deserved better beginnings than staples. And if Jesus' parents couldn't afford to give birth in an inn, I'm sure today They still couldn't afford to give birth in a hospital. If Mary had Jesus today, she would look around and wonder how her dollars could stretch till tomorrow. With the prices of Pampers and Similac and groceries skyrocketing and piling up, see, the wise man might have to visit Jesus in a homeless shelter, and everyone is looking for a savior in a world where it's too expensive to give birth, let alone too dangerous to raise one. See, every year the holidays come before the holiday pay, and it's hard. It's hard to be Mary when the world is at war, or you're at war with yourself, and the government shuts down on you, and the politicians that you pay choose not to fight for you. But still, we have buried far too many people not to still see the blessing of air and breath in our lungs. See, this year was not an easy year, but still we made it here. So if we can't get a Christmas miracle, then let us be a Christmas miracle. Let us smile and be a reason to. Let us give, whether it is a hug or a helping hand. Let us live, let us laugh, and most importantly, let us love till we unwrap the very boxes that we put ourselves in.